We often think of religion as a haven, a source of light and guidance. But for many, it can also be a place of shadows, a breeding ground for pain and fear. This is the story of those who carry the scars of religious trauma, whose spiritual journeys have been shaped by experiences of abuse and manipulation and loss, and the impact that can have on their spiritual journey later in life.
My faith was supposed to be a lifeline, but it felt like a chokehold.
The guilt, the shame, and feelings of not being good enough. It followed me everywhere, even after I left.
The gatekeeping and gaslighting was even worse after getting involved in a community that was supposed to be open and affirming of all people. Finding my own spirituality meant questioning everything I was taught to believe.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another installment of the Inner Alchemy Live podcast. I'm John Michael Salvato. I'll be your host for this evening's show. And I want to apologize up front because just moments before going live to talk about religious trauma, I found out that an acquaintance of mine, someone who at one time was actually a friend, the Reverend Robert Hefner, Bob Hefner, a Catholic priest in Palm Bay, Florida, who was previously in Orlando when I was a teen, was shot, as was his sister and another individual in an altercation. I don't know very much more about it. I'm just a little bit stunned to have gotten this news, particularly when we're going to talk um, about religious trauma and the things that lead so many people into really dark places in their spiritual paths, in their spiritual journeys. And so I want to first start by saying that our thoughts and condolences are with the family of Father Bob Hefner and his sister and the other individual who hasn't been named yet, who was killed in that incident, as well as the two officers who were injured responding to the scene. So our thoughts and prayers are with all of you. Our condolences. May their memories be a blessing, and may those who mourn their loss be comforted. So I wanted to talk about this tonight because of some of the things that were happening on social media in the last several days. And several folks were messaging me and asking me to comment on some of the really sort of putrid gatekeepy kind of things that were denigrating other people's spiritual practices. Things like proclamations that ancestor work is not magic, or that doing shadow work did not involve magic or esotericism. And so these sorts of things just really made me realize that there was a discussion that should be had. And I hope that this will serve as sort of the entry into that discussion. But I encourage you, if you're watching this tonight, to join this conversation in this moment and feel free to comment. And we'll share your comments as they come in. I'm doing this, excuse me, without a producer tonight. So I'll be multitasking and watching my screen, not watching the camera. So I'm going to do my very best. But I thought that it was important to talk about this because so many people have said that they read the things that I post on social media and want to know what I have against Wicca or pop culture witchcraft, neo paganism, and all of that. And that really underscores for me the sort of the underlying problem that folks do not take the time to ask that sort of question, to really engage people that they disagree with, or people who are putting out there, being vulnerable out there, and talking about their feelings about spirituality. Because I don't have any hatred or malintent toward people who practice pop culture witchcraft and Wicca and Gardnerian witchcraft. I have so many people in my personal life who are practitioners in the Minoan Brotherhood and in the fairy tradition. So I don't hold those people with disdain, but I do hold those who promote false narratives in disdain. Those people who gatekeep, those people who try to pretend that pop culture witchcraft is anything other than a product of the 20th and 21st centuries. It has no connection, no roots in Italy and Tuscany as was purported by so many people. We've done programs on that. I'd be happy to have a discussion, roundtable discussion with folks. And I have offered several times to people who are very big on promoting themselves as PhDs in witchcraft and esotericism and people who claim to be experts in their field, but who then purport to be sharing facts that are actually based on their biases. And so I've invited those folks to be on the show. I've invited those folks to join a conversation. They know how to reach me, and they don't. And when I call them out on the things that they are mistaken about, they either block me or just go somewhere else and badmouth me. Now it's no surprise that some of these people do that because they're all affiliated with a particularly um, offensive character in Salem and New Orleans, who is tantamount to Voldemort without the power. The impotent Voldemort is what I'll call him, because his uh, you know attempts to disparage and marginalize and create divisions within the esoteric community are well known. But the people who participate in his events and shows and other self-aggrandizing opportunities are these same people who are gatekeeping, these same people who are attacking really good practitioners. So I wanted to bring something to the table of value, and I think that this is an opportunity for the rest of us to exercise compassion, because quite often what I think happens is these are people who were the most wounded by organized religion. So the people who tell other practitioners, maybe who practice, brujeria de rancho, or people who practice Catholic conjure or benedicaria, all of those folks that are being criticized and saying, oh, you're not really practicing witchcraft, you're not really practicing magic. We could have the discussion about the fact that our ancestors wouldn't have called it witchcraft and they would have had complete disdain. I do understand, however, that in the 20th and 21st century, many practitioners, including me at one time, felt like we could reclaim the word witchcraft and take it out of the clutches of the institutional churches that like so much to use it as an accusation, as a pejorative. But that's again another discussion. But what we really, I think, have to look at is so many people that are in the esoteric and alternative spiritual space, if you will, the people that are, especially that are in the neo pagan community, have come from religious backgrounds, church backgrounds, where they were wounded, where they were marginalized, where they may have not felt like they were treated fairly. And in many cases, were among those of us who were abused by the church. And so they come with that baggage. They come with those issues, to seek to fill something, a void in their lives, spiritually, to replace that sense of community, to replace that sense of belonging that they should have been able to find in any spiritual community that was of the same accord, that believed the same things that they believed. And so what happens is those broken people decide to become involved in another spiritual community, and they begin to manifest the same abusive behaviors of their oppressors in the previous experience, in the church community, or in their previous spiritual community, whatever that looked like. And we don't just find that in neo paganism, we find that in the ashram community, the Gurukul system. We find that in yoga centers. We find that in other spiritual communities, and especially rife on social media communities, virtual communities, where you have these gatekeepers who are really all about self aggrandizement. They're all about selling their products. They're all about selling their books, or they're all about, selling that next course. And they lose sight of what really drew them to their spiritual path. If in fact something meaningful drew them to that path. Now, I do believe there are some people, like our friend that I spoke about in the beginning of this broadcast in Salem and New Orleans, who uh, are just parasites. They're just there to take advantage, opportunists, take advantage of, as they put it, the little old ladies who come in on a bus on their way to the reservations to gamble, to the casinos to gamble. That's really smarmy and disgusting. But there will always be, and have always been, people. We have seen evidence of that sort of opportunism on talk shows in the '80s with Joan Rivers and Sally Jesse Raphael, where some of these self-aggrandizing, self-promoting folks would go on and they would spout 15 to 20 minutes of bullshit, smoke and mirrors, nonsense, and say that that's what witchcraft was all about. When in fact it was what pop culture witchcraft was in the '80s, which I think was one of the most embarrassing times in the history of the occult in the West. Because there was such nonsense, such bullshit, so many lies, and such showmanship, grandstanding. But when we understand that the people online who are posting absurd bullshit like, oh, my ancestors just told me that it's time for me to get back at the people who are messing with me, or the ones who feel like I have to make proclamations about somebody else's spiritual path. Just understand they are broken people who probably came from religious traditions where that was done. If you want to see real practitioners take their time to provide something of value, not saying, here, I'm going to give you this and you're going to give me that. It's not transactional. People who are authentic practitioners, and there are so many that I could name, the people like Storm Fairy Wolf and Chaz and Matt and Devin, all of these folks, people in the non neo pagan world, like Sen Elias and so many other people that I could go on and on. Leilani up in New York, Reverend Dominic Guerriero, Michael McQueen. Like I said, I'm really distracted by this news about my friend. I apologize. I have not forgotten everyone. I mean, I'm sure I have forgotten some of the people that I would like to mention at this time. But those are people who come to social media, they come to their local communities, they come to the world in general, and they bring value. They don't say what's in it for me. Amazing people like Chris Allen and Durgadas Duriel, people who say, this is my opportunity to serve those who are seeking, because we realize that everything that was given to us generously. And whether that means that somebody else taught us and gave it generously, or we went out into the world and we sought out the information, someone still provided generously the material that we use, whether as a catalyst to take us to the next step, or as insight and useful information. And that includes our ancestors. And so when people are doing this, I just want to say that if somebody is criticizing your spiritual path, if they're attacking you personally, or they're attacking your tradition, then just let that just roll off your back, because that says more about them than it does about you. Now, I make no secrets about the fact that I find neo paganism problematic for the reasons that I said. I find all organized and institutional religion to be problematic for much the same reasons. I don't like gatekeeping. I don't like people being told what they can and can't do, what they can and can't believe, and being placed inside of a box. This is the spell you do to get this kind of result, rather than teaching them, if you do this kind of a spell, it will produce this kind of result, and here's why. Let's look at the components of the spell itself. Let's look at what you have to do as a person to draw on your power to bring about the desired outcomes. And so I think that it's I've been asked to say what I can say, share what I can share with you about this. I would say don't blow this out of proportion. I'm sure that the person who was making these posts could be having a bad day. I'm always a little bit skeptical whenever somebody tries to tell me that they are a practitioner of a folk magic tradition, an African diasporic tradition, or an organic, culturally rooted ancient tradition, and then sprinkled throughout their websites and their marketing materials, they call themselves high priests, high priestesses, and use all of these neo-pagan Wiccan terms. It just sounds to me like that's somebody who's still seeking and probably ought to be quiet in the public forum. Certainly should be more respectful of their ancestors, as to not use uh, the ancestors' name to promote egomaniacal, I'm going to get you bullshit, out there. It's not about what you say; it's about what you do. And so your actions are always, as the adage goes, your actions will speak louder than words. Your actions will, how you treat somebody says a whole lot more than your bona fides, than your qualifications, because it tells me what your spiritual practice is. So just relax, everybody. Hang tight. In the course that I'm teaching at the Inner Alchemy Mystery School, we're going to be unpacking this idea of of how religious trauma impacts us. And we're going to talk about things like the fact that people who were abused by clergy, for example, will often go and seek non hierarchical expressions of spirituality so they're not put in that situation. Somebody who may have been manipulated and controlled by a church and worked and lived within strict guidelines, their trauma response might be to go out and find the authoritarian teacher who treats them with, wraps the authoritarianism in love. And we see that on ashrams, all over the world. Another common experience of folks who bring their religious trauma with them are the folks who are just so anti-religion that they feel compelled to have to attack everybody's belief. And I've said before that I will respect your right to express who you are, your true nature, source or God or whatever you choose to call it, in any way you choose, including religious traditions. That respect for your right to practice as you see fit doesn't mean I am obligated in any way to endorse your tradition, to respect the tradition itself, to think that anything that it teaches is healthy or wholesome or true. I don't have to accept that, but I do have to accept your right to be on your journey, because it makes no sense to be otherwise. It makes no sense to say that you can't be on the spiritual trajectory that you're on. You can't walk your path. Why? Because if you walk my path, you're not going to learn your lessons. You're not going to find what you're looking for. You're going to find what I'm looking for. So I'm not doing any service. I'm not being compassionate. I'm not being honest if I try to interfere with your journey, because I wouldn't like it when someone tries to do the same thing to me. So I guess what I'm saying is, and I wanted to talk about this in the beginning of the year because we're moving up to a place where at Candlemas on the 2nd of February, a spiritual tradition within esoteric and Orthodox Catholicism that and Roman Catholicism that is derived directly from the practices that surrounded Lupercalia, a time of purification, a time when they would purify and bless the candles at Candlemas or the implements that were used in their spiritual tradition at Lupercalia. And so the greatest instrument you or I will ever have is the instrument of our hearts and our minds. And so don't let someone else disturb your peace. Don't let someone else have the pen that's writing the story of your spiritual journey. And by all means, think twice before you try to do the same thing to someone else. I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm going to be talking at much greater depth for the students of the Inner Alchemy Mystery School about it. But I wanted to put out a 20 or 25-minute live tonight just so that folks could take a breath, take a step back. And if you find the writings of somebody online who's telling you what you can and can't do and telling you whether your shadow work is magical or not, understand that for them, I'm sure that's probably true. It takes a level of spiritual maturity to embrace a worldview that is entirely magical, where you understand everything you do is esoteric, everything you do is magical, metaphysical. And so just block them or disconnect from them. Nobody's twisting your arm to follow somebody on social media. That's what I did when I saw the nonsense starting last night. I immediately just removed myself from the fray. And so I encourage you to do the same thing. I encourage you to have a fantastic end of the month of January, and look forward to sharing with you some more in the coming weeks. And again, thanks for being patient with me with my scattered focus tonight, as this news has really taken me by shock. So take care, everybody. Love and appreciate you.